All right. You see my slide, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think you're all here because I think many of you probably already know Larry, but he's a climate advocate extraordinaire. And so is this just part of his bio. He's got quite a lengthy, interesting bio, but 2011 is when he retired. Then he founded Plano Solar Advocates, a grassroots volunteer group, increased solar use in Plano. And then 2014, he was on the board of the Texas Solar Energy Society. And it's through this that he met Matt Weldon, another CCLer outside of Austin. That's where I heard about CC. And I guess, Larry, you joined around 2016, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, right there, right below 2016, because you joined us a little bit before I did. And then he's also active with Republic EN, Conservative Eco Right Climate Action Group. It's quite an influential group, and so he's well known in more than one circle. So anyway, his topic today is CCL policy efforts. So I'm going to stop my share and then let Larry share his presentation. And if I think, Larry, you said if anybody has questions along the way, they can ask you, or you can put them in chat as well, and we'll monitor that, and then we'll do Q&A afterwards. But if you have questions along the way, that's okay, Larry?
Yeah, that's fine. And if you do, I guess just, come off mute and ask the question, or if you raise your electronic hand, maybe Roger or Joe can kind of keep a pulse on if there's some hands up that I miss once I start sharing here. So let me start with share. Okay, so can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for coming today. I know I was watching a football game before I came to this, so some of you guys may be watching playoffs, but hopefully you've got if that's something you've been doing, you can put it on record or something. So we want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing in Texas at the state level around CCL policy efforts. But we're going to start off with a little bit of a kind of an action for everybody who's on the call, and I put something in chat that basically I would like for everybody who's on the call to take a minute to go put your state house representative or lower chamber representative, your state senator or upper chamber, depending on which state you're in, and your congressional member in the chat. And if you don't know all of those, I did find links for all of our Third Coast Plus people. So if you don't know how to find that out, put those in there. And you should be putting at least 3 names in the chat. Your state house representative, your state senator, and your congressional member. And so in my case, Jeff Leach is my state house representative from House District 67, Senate District 8. Angela Paxton is my state representative, and then my congressional representative, member of Congress from Texas 04 is Pat Fallon. So those are 3 names that I try to keep in front when I'm thinking about advocating for policies for CCL. And so let's see if other people have been finding those. I see Joe's got his congressional representative. Dwayne's got his House District 125. Let's see, David Kane's got his I don't know if that David's that's his California district. Yeah, but it's in his California, I think, district.
Yeah, California, sorry.
Yeah. So Larry Linnesmith's got Vicki Goodwin for House District. Let's see, Kathy Fackler's got all 3 of hers. All right, good. All right. Joe's adding some more as he goes. Diane's added some. Good. So with CCL, we really focus on national policy, and So most of us now have learned our member of Congress name, maybe interacted with them, lobbied with them, but it's not quite as common to know necessarily your state representatives. I know I didn't until I started thinking about advocating for solar, and then started advocating for climate policies. So, my challenge to you is, and Gary, we don't want you doing this right now because you're driving, but make sure that you take some time, if you don't know who those representatives are, find out and then kind of keep current on those, because they can help us down the road here, I think. And so, all right. So a lot of people put their stuff, information in the chat, so that's great. Oops. Move on to them. So from a Texas perspective, so again, this is for Third Coast Plus and other people that may have joined, but here in Texas, we say, why would we want to focus on Texas? Well, it's the 9th largest economy. GDP is actually bigger than Canada, and it's the 8th largest emitter of emissions, CO2 and methane, just behind Canada. So we're the largest energy producer and the highest CO2 emitter. So not something you want to say to your representative necessarily, but a lot of times our US members of Congress will harp on China, that, we need to do things to get China under control. Well, in the United States, Texas is the China of the United States. We are the largest producer, and probably the largest historical producer as well. So that's why there's lots of opportunities in Texas and things we need to do here to do our part. So again, why do we want to engage with other state legislators? Well, if we think of our 5 levers of political will, lobbying, it's a great way to, generally you can get access to your state elected official a little bit easier than your member of Congress. So it's a good way to practice and engage lobbying efforts. And then it's also, think of all of those elected officials at the state level as grass tops. And so getting more grass tops awareness, they can be potentially allies for when we go talk to our members of Congress as well. So that's some reasons why we want to do this state level type activities. So kind of the outline of the talk today is, I want to talk a little bit about some recent Texas legislative cycles that we've been through. And so I've got kind of a high level summary on that, and then some detail to follow behind to kind of talk about our journey, if you will. And what I want to spend a little time too on the Texas advocacy landscape. It's important for, CCL volunteers to kind of, if they're not already engaged with other advocacy groups, to kind of engage with them, at various levels, and find out kind of where CCL can complement their efforts and they can complement our efforts. Then we'll do a little bit more detail on the timeline of the cycles that we went through, the legislative cycles we went through. And then I also want to talk a little bit about collaborating in business and government organizations. So partnering with, in particular, business alliances and groups are very important. And that was very important to us when we did our lobby day. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then kind of what do we do next? How do we keep moving along? So I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide, and then we're going to go through a little bit more details on this. But basically, we've been trying to do things at the state level in Texas for 3 legislative cycles. So in 2019, it was the 86th regular session of the legislature. So the regular session generally runs from January to May, and then there was the 87th regular session was in January 2021, and then most recently the 88th regular session was in 2023. Now, if you're here in Texas, you know that we've also had 4 special sessions that just kind of cascade after this. We're not going to talk about those because those generally have targeted things that at this point haven't been related to energy or climate. So the middle column kind of talks a little bit about what we were trying to do, volunteers that have engaged on this. And then the third column is kind of more broadly speaking around climate and energy. what went on in the Texas legislature. So in 2019, our main focus was trying to get some sponsor to actually introduce an economic and environmental stewardship resolution that was modeled after Utah. We'll talk more about that. And then broadly at the state legislative session, independent of what CCL was trying to do, the good news was there was 14 climate-related bills and resolutions introduced. One of those bills received a hearing, but it died in committee, and so 0 passed. So the good news is there were some bills introduced. The bad news was they didn't get much traction. And then, so in the 87th regular session, which began in January 2021, we were able to get a sponsor for our version of the environmental and economic stewardship resolution. We spent a lot of time advocating to get Republican co-sponsors. We weren't able to get any, but we did get 7 Democratic sponsors on that resolution. More broadly, there was 12 climate bills introduced. There was 0 committee hearings on any of those 12, including our resolution, and therefore none passed. But a positive out of that during that time period was the Energy and Climate Caucus was formed, intended to be bipartisan, but similarly to our resolution, they couldn't get any Republicans to join, so it was 18 Democrats, but something started from a caucus standpoint. We'll talk a little bit more about that going forward. And then in the 88th regular session, that's the one that happened in January to May of this year, we had our first lobby day, and real exciting. We, a lot of participation. And what we did there was a little bit different. We kind of put our resolution on the shelf, and we looked at trying to advocate for bills that were being introduced that could help improve transmission by reducing congestion and allow really for more renewable energy to be used. So there was 8 climate-related bills. There was a lot of clean energy bills and stuff introduced, but 8 climate-related ones. They didn't get any hearings, and none, so therefore none passed. But the good news is the Energy and Climate Caucus was expanded. There are now 10 Republicans on there. It went to 40 House Democrats and 3 Democratic senators. So that's kind of broadly, what's gone on and kind of how we've been trying to engage a little bit. And now, later I'll go through a little bit more detail, kind of some background on that. So now I want to touch a little bit on advocacy organizations, and this is something that I would encourage CCL volunteers, if they have time, and if you're not already engaged with some of these other groups, here's a couple that you might kind of start connecting with, because this in particular, this is how I started, getting some involvement and knowing a little bit about what's going on at the state legislature activity. So one, the Alliance for Clean Texas, that particular alliance has been around for well over 10 years. They hold calls and meetings during the regular session and leading up to it. So they're not having any meetings right now, for example, but at the maybe 3 or 4 months, 3 months before the next regular session, they'll start having calls. They try to track bills to support, oppose, or be neutral on them. They help develop action alerts. They form subcommittees for strategies to try to provide testimony at hearings. The primary leads of this alliance, even though there's like over 150 partner organizations, a lot of community organizations across the state, but the primary leads are Public Citizen Texas, the Sierra Club Lone Star Chapter, Environment Texas. There's a couple others, but those are kind of prominent names of people that help lead this activity. And so if you're interested in kind of connecting a little bit more and seeing what other groups are doing, you can check out this link and join the kind of the email list, and then they'll add you to when they start having meetings if you're interested. They do have running meetings. So if you click on this link, we'll send out the PDF of the presentation later if you want to look at some of the meeting minutes from what happened this last legislative session. It's a way to kind of dig in a little bit as to what's going on. Now, more recently, there's a group that started that's a little bit more climate focused. The other group is kind of broadly environmental issues on lots of different things, from cement plant pollution to renewable concerns of waste and all sorts of things. The statewide climate coalition is a little bit more focused on climate, but it started fairly recently. And one of the nice things that they try to do is have guest speakers from different organizations or different groups to help share information across Texas. And so, for example, we shared our Lobby Day event with that, and we've also helped find speakers for that meeting to help share information there as well. And so if you have time and you're interested, there's a member intake form for that as well. So that's a way to kind of branch out, to get to know kind of what other groups are doing, if you haven't had a chance to kind of dabble in that space. So now I want to kind of go through a little bit of background, kind of our timeline. And this was kind of a little historical journey here, circa 2018. I remember thinking about, how can we start improving or promoting the constructive bipartisan conversations on climate in Texas. And so I went and met with my state representative, Jeff Leach, who was back then and even further back, my state rep. And we had a conversation about this, and he was he was interested in talking about it, but he really had no background or no, words of wisdom or whatever. But he said, "Hey, is there a caucus I can join?" And so I looked around and couldn't find anything, and was checking with his staff. And he said, "Well, look and see if you can find other examples in other states, that maybe one could be formed." And lo and behold, in my search, I found this effort that was going on in Utah. And this was sponsored or originated by some high school students. And as I dug into it a little bit, I found out CCL volunteers were very engaged in this process in Utah. So I got to meet and talk with Tom Moyer, who's I think still the state coordinator for Utah with CCL. And they came up with this idea of this resolution and kind of the history of, they wanted to get it on the books that, climate was an issue and there was economic opportunities, in solving it. And part of the reason this was a focus for them was 6 years earlier, I guess, the state legislature in Utah, which is very Republican focused, supermajority Republican, it passed a resolution that said basically climate change is a hoax. And so the high school students, as they were going through high school, said, "Oh my gosh, this is a problem. We got to turn the conversation." And so that was kind of their perspective. And if you really want to learn a little bit about it, Piper Christian, who's now, I think, on the advisory board for Citizens Climate Lobby, she spoke at the June conference. And so very powerful journey they went on. And so I encourage you to check out that. So anyway, so the idea then was, well, can we do something in Texas? So we started with a few volunteers. Marie Meglin kind of helped out quite a bit. And she actually kind of worked with some students in the Katy area. And they actually had a meeting back in December of 2018. It was led by CCL intern Mizuki Karada, and Marie Meglin helped out. And they had this meeting with Representative John Zerwas. And so it was a good start. Mizuki actually even made a little social media video about how to meet with your legislator. So it stirred up some interest, particularly with some Houston high school students. And that was kind of how things started for that 2019 legislative session. So if you recall from the overview, we weren't able to find a sponsor, but we did look at some of those bills that were climate friendly, which I listed some of them here on the bill. And you can see one of the things interesting to note was one of the bills, the Raymond, I can't remember now which jurisdiction he was in, but he actually was suggesting that that they conduct an analysis, and it references the Climate Leadership Council. So there are some people in the legislature who even knew about the Climate Leadership Council, so that was kind of encouraging. But unfortunately, none of those bills were granted hearings. So as CCL volunteers, we didn't have any opportunity to kind of get our voice heard from a public testimony perspective. So during the interim period between these sessions, we kind of stepped back and were regrouping, and then COVID hit. And so that kind of, created lots of challenges for everybody. But we continued to search for a resolution sponsor, and we had volunteers that had meetings with their legislators. At that time, they were all Zoom meetings, and there were over 10 meetings held. And so that was good. We started getting some FaceTime in front of state legislators. And then in the fall of 2020, Rafael Anchia had agreed to go ahead and sponsor or introduce our resolution in the upcoming activity. Now, in conversations with his staff, they said it would really be good if you could get a Republican co-sponsor. We said, yes, we're working hard on that. But if you could get introduced, we'll keep working on it. So the resolution, HCR 22 was a concurrent resolution, which is what they had done in Utah. So we were borrowing a lot of their lessons learned. And that was introduced in January of 2021. It was referred to the Environmental Regulation Committee in March. And during that time, we were trying to build up outreach to talk to Republican co-sponsors. So we had 37 letters sent by constituents. So we reached out to find CCL volunteers that were constituents with a letter requesting that they join as co-sponsors. And we also sent them a copy of the little book, the World's Littlest Book on Climate. We sent that out to 27 Republican House districts and 10 Republican Senate districts. And then during that period, we also had 31 virtual lobby meetings with volunteers, 20 of those were with Republican offices and 11 with Democratic offices. We also sent action alerts to try to get people to make comments or write to their representatives on particular bills that were moving, anything that was clean energy, electric vehicle related, those types of things. But ultimately, we didn't get any co-sponsors and no committee hearings were granted, so that we, again, didn't have any opportunity to provide testimony, which is one of the things that the Utah students did. And that was how they got some traction with their initiatives. So then we said, okay, well, let's look at the next interim period, and see what we can do different. And so normally what happens in the Texas legislature is in these interim periods, the committees have been given some, assignments or things to go look into, and they have hearings during the interim periods to address those. So what we did is we spent some of the number of volunteers, we went through and said, if there's anything at a particular hearing that has anything to do with energy, renewable energy, anything that has something to do with potentially greenhouse gas emissions, let's see if we can have volunteers go testify. So, and engage either by writing letters or providing public comments to do this. And one of the things that happened during COVID was the state legislature made it easier for people to submit written comments as part of the public record. And so we are able to leverage that as well. But taking advantage of CCL volunteers that actually live in the Austin area, we ended up with 16 in-person testimonies in over 5 different committees at various hearings. And we also had 220 written comments submitted on lots of different committees hearings. So again, we were taking this opportunity to get CCL name recognition with legislators as being rational, calm climate advocates trying to make things happen. So this is what we had been trying to do in some of those other sessions, but because we couldn't get the bills that we were trying to support, our resolutions weren't getting hearings, we just said, hey, let's take advantage of these interim hearings. And so, we had, again, some participation by 85 different volunteers in combination of written and in-person testimony. So I really appreciate our volunteers in the Austin area who were able to take time to do some of these things. And so then, as we kind of laid some groundwork in the interim, then the conversation shifted with our kind of formed a policy team, and then it turned into a, hey, let's actually go see if we can have a lobby event in Texas. And so lots of great work by volunteers in helping ramp this up. And I got to put a big plug in for Ann Drum, who was kind of the mastermind behind the manually managing and coordinating how to get these meetings organized and scheduled. And obviously, Susan Adams was really helping champion this from the regional coordinator role. So we ended up having 81 people from across the state, and we had those people participated in 41 different state house, or they represented 41 different state house districts and 25 state senate districts. We ended up with 66 meetings, 47 Republican, 19 Democrat, which really represented over a third of the legislature, because we have 150 state representatives and 31 state senators. And for the offices where we didn't have meetings, we had volunteers that went and had left leave behinds. So, a lot of activity going on in preparation, a lot of great work there from volunteers. And then we had a fun couple of days there for that. Our lobby meeting messaging was kind of a primary ask. Again, we weren't trying to promote a resolution specifically. We were trying to take advantage of existing bills that would end up helping improve transmission infrastructure to reduce congestion. We advocated for these principles around expanding economic opportunities, improving reliability, key point saving consumers money, and obviously reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then our secondary ask was, especially to Republican offices, is please look into the Texas Energy and Climate Caucus and consider joining. So that was kind of our push for those lobby meetings. And then beyond Lobby Day, which was in March, so there were still 2 months left, we looked at other bills, sent out action alerts. We had people actually providing in-person testimony for bills that we were supporting. We got 230 plus written comments submitted on the public record using the online submission tool. And then we also had people calling their state legislatures on specific bills. So had really good participation from a lot of volunteers all across the state. And, if you combine that, what we did during the interim and during the session, again, you can see some growing numbers there. So we were really excited to have volunteers engaged with that. So now I'm kind of stepping back and saying, well, what really happened? Well, it was kind of a strange regular session when it came to energy, because Texas is pretty friendly and pretty permit friendly for, that's why we have so much wind, and our solar is gradually, is really ramping fast. But there was a lot of incumbency pushing state legislators to say slow roll or help put on the brakes from that expansion. So the general consensus with the clean energy experts that we were trying to learn from and other advocacy groups, the general trend was, oh, it could have been worse. So, it was more complicated than just natural gas versus renewable. But there's lots of summaries out there, and so we put some of those things out there as well. But in process of both the lobby day and prior to the lobby day and after the lobby day, we had some volunteers that were actually making some pretty strong connections with a couple of key committee chair people, and it helped us get a little bit better insight. And so there were some committee chairs that were really doing kind of a behind the scenes effort to make sure that some of the really crazy anti-renewable stuff that was being proposed didn't make it all the way to the floor. So that was kind of encouraging. Just a little bit about, bills in Texas. How many bills become law? So I've highlighted in green House bills and Senate bills. And then these other ones are more resolutions, so they're not as significant. So the session started in January, and as of the middle of April, 4/14, there was almost 8,000 bills submitted. 97 days had been completed of the session. There was 43 days left. None had been passed. So, we're almost 2/3 through the session, no bills passed. At the end of the session, there were, around 8,000 introduced, 1,200 passed, and 76 were vetoed. So in that last 40 days, it's basically a mad dash. It's a wild, uncontrolled rush, and the lobby, the industry lobbyist and all the other stuff, it's kind of a mayhem or whatever, but they're kind of used to it. So we just kind of followed along and helped where we could. So some of the appreciations that we went and reached out to legislators, in particular Drew Darby. He sponsored 2 transmission bills, and they eventually got tagged as woke bills, and so they were blocked, but we eventually got, there was a different bill that passed that included some hooks to help support electricity transmission in oil and gas areas. And so that one passed. So anyway, big thanks to Representative Darby. He's also on the Climate Caucus. We appreciate that. Senator Nathan Johnson and worked with Todd Hunter, who was the State Affairs House Committee. He was one of the guys that Larry Lennon-Smith had kind of connected with, and really helped to work to pass some things under the radar, if you will. And those two helped to push through virtual power plants to continue development of virtual power plants in Texas, which I think that helps distributed generation and clean energy in that respect. There were some bills around improving and updating the statewide energy codes. Those passed both chambers. But again, because this was a weird regular session that has led to 4 special sessions, Governor Abbott vetoed that statewide energy code update because they were fighting over property taxes and school vouchers and things like that. So progress was made, but sometimes it gets blunted back. Rafael Anchia had proposed an energy efficiency council that made it through the House, but it died in the Senate. And then Senator Eckhart had a number of bills around energy efficiency. This one made it the furthest, but it died because they ran out of time. So that's kind of a backdrop of the kind of what CCL was trying to do, and us learning a little bit about the mayhem of things going through the legislature. So any questions or comments at this point? Okay.
I've got a question, Larry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Who else had a question?
Well, yeah, I've got a question. You mentioned Drew Darby, and he seems to be the nearest thing we have to kind of an ally on the Republican side in the climate area. And I know one of the recommendations I got from my meeting with Cunningham was that we haven't had a meeting with Darby yet. We should really look to get one. Has anybody trying to do that in terms of getting a face-to-face with Drew Darby?
Yes, actually, Ed, George, and Susan Gillette out in Lubbock are working to try to do that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and Hans, I would say that Chairman Hunter is probably as good a friend as we have in the legislature. He's actually concerned about climate change and encouraged me to keep making testimony about it that was practical and non-political. So I'd put him on that short list as well.
Bye.
Bill and Kathy?
Well, Roger and I were in Washington with the Conservative Caucus right after your state lobby day. And so we talked about what y'all had done in Austin, and CCLers were very interested in it. But when we talked to representatives and offices on the Hill, they were very interested. Their ears perked up. they wanted to find out more. And separately, in several meetings, either they or we have brought up state outreach, and that's started a discussion. And it is a very effective way to increase our reception on the federal hill, as well as helping the state efforts.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's good feedback. And again, we have to get some bipartisan focus on this, and so if we can help bring kind of that CCL can bring volunteers into that leading that conversation at the state level, hopefully that'll help. Because again, I think there's a lot of environmental groups here in Texas that have done a lot of good work. My observation has been they know that climate is a topic that most, at least the Republican side, they turn off and they don't listen. And there's so many other environmental issues being challenged. They tend to focus on that. So I think it's an opportunity for CCL volunteers to kind of plug a gap and also bring in, we don't carry yet a negative perception to some of the Republican legislators, I think. And so that's our opportunity, I think, to continue expanding there. So,
Yeah,
Roger.
I was gonna ask about the Energy and Climate Caucus expansion that happened in the last session. Did CCL have any influence on this? Can we take any credit for that happening?
I don't know for sure, but once we had been talking with Patricia Zavala, the executive director, and she had been feeding us names of legislators that they thought would be Republicans most likely interested to join. So they were kind of some of the targets of volunteers reaching out. Whether we never necessarily got any meetings where we got confirmation where somebody said, "Oh yeah, now I'm going to join." It's just when the session started, they had these 10 show up, and we went, "Wow, that's great." We don't care how they got there, but that's great. So maybe we did have a little influence. I don't know for sure though.
Do we know what they do, or is this kind of just something in name and they're not very active?
No, they're actually they've got a website that talks about some of the things they're doing, and part of what our next steps are during this interim session. We want to try to connect with as many of those legislators to find out what they're going to try to push in the next legislative session. The thing they ended up doing a lot, they created a kind of a sister nonprofit called Powerhouse Texas, which is a nonprofit, and they ended up doing education sessions for legislators and staff during the legislative session. So Powerhouse Texas is, as a matter of fact, that's actually one of the next things I'm going to talk about, because I think that's, again, a resource for us as well. So,
yeah. Mark?
Larry, were there any bills dealing with methane pollution?
Yeah, there were some. I don't. Larry Leonard Smith, do you remember if there was anything specific, or there was a lot of stuff going on with the EPA that some were pushing back on federal legislation, but I think they were kind of waiting to see how that shook out. So,
yeah, I testified about flaring in the interim, and Chairman Landgraf had absolutely no interest in what I had to say. I think would be fair to say. And they're very defensive about methane leaks, and they pushed back on the EPA and said that if they push that direction, it would harm our ability to help our allies. But the Texas side of the Permian Basin has twice the amount of methane leaks as the New Mexico side per capita for the amount of natural gas produced. So we're a dirty state, and those methane leaks are both a contributor to ozone, which is increasing. All 5 of our major metropolitan areas have do not meet EPA standards and we have increasing heat, increasing cars, increasing ozone. So that's a problem, but it's also some low hanging fruit that I think we can work on.
Yeah, let me kind of run through the rest of this kind of quickly here. So again, some of these collaborating, I call them government and some NGOs. From a legislative perspective, again, the Texas Energy and Climate Caucus, is definitely a group that we want to stay connected with and work with them and amplify as much as possible what they're doing or what they will be doing. And then their sister organization, the Powerhouse Texas, they just, so during the session, they hosted, I think, 7 or 8 education sessions. And if you go to their website, I think they actually have YouTube videos of those little events. So that was helpful. They've announced just in the last month an advisory committee of university experts and industry experts to be available to help legislators understand more things about climate and energy. So again, that's, those 2 organizations I think are kind of lead organizations that we should try to, learn from and amplify what they're doing. Another organization that we're trying to follow is Texas 2036. They haven't done a lot on climate, but they've had lots of success and they've been around for a long time on bipartisan policy issues. So, they're a group, and I talked with one of their communications vice president or whatever not too long ago, and she said they're going to introduce a energy dashboard for the state that includes greenhouse gas emissions. So they're slowly trying to get into talking about this, but they kind of said we have to be a little bit careful because sometimes if we get too deep into this, we might lose some of our donors. So that's a little frustrating, but that's not the first time we've heard that particular issue for here in Texas. With the IRA passed, there is a group that's holding kind of biweekly calls to help spread the word about things that are happening related to Texas. So that's another thing that people might want to follow. And there's a running agenda, and I think you can send an email to this Emily, who's works with Doug Lewin's group, who's actually sponsoring that. So that's a good one. A quick note on the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. The state of Texas actually applied for a climate pollution reduction grant program, and they have a person assigned. Her name escapes me, but I've connected with her. She actually presented at one of the IRA roundtable calls, and they have a website where you can go, put your email address in and then stay connected for email updates. So the good news is this is the first state agency that I've ever seen that has climate in their program name. So maybe there's a little bit of breakthrough happening. A lot of the cities and metro areas along around the state are also applied and are participating in these climate pollution reduction grants. And so at the state level, they're trying to complement that and do things that help complement what the cities are doing. So anyway, that's kind of a good news thing as well. Want to mention these 2 business and industry groups. The Advanced Power Alliance was very, very helpful in helping us prepare for our lobby day and our messaging. Judd Messer, before the lobby meeting, he spent a lot of time in calls with us to help us figure out what we might want to lobby for. They guided us on, trigger words to stay away from or trigger topics and stuff. So, we definitely want to continue working with them. And more recently, there's a group called Power Up Texas, which is an alliance primarily of Chamber of Commerce's of rural areas that are advocating for clean energy across the state and to help educate and advocate for improving clean energy. So we've had some conversations with them more recently, and we think as the interim proceeds, And as we go into the next legislative session, that's a group that we want to stay tightly coupled with, and again, help amplify any of the good things that they're doing as well. Okay, so kind of quickly wrapping up here, what are the next steps? Main message, if you haven't joined the state action team, please join the state action team. The group on community, we're going to try to use that as a focal point for sending out information. We have a couple of actions that you can do right now. Get other CCL volunteers in the state or even outside the state if you want to follow what we're doing. And then we're going to be focusing on kind of interim meetings with legislators, targeting primarily legislators that are participating in the caucus. And what we want to do is basically gather intelligence from them as much as possible from these meetings to see what they're thinking about, what they think what can be possible, and then figure out, what obstacles there may be, and learn from them. And again, kind of develop relationships so that we're in a better position to help, the caucus be successful with things that they introduce in the next session. And so right now we've got Ann Drum put together a really excellent meeting guide. It's got a lot of information about, trying to form a teams. She's also created a master tracking spreadsheet again, like she did for our lobby day. And she's trying to help reach out to volunteers to kind of help lead these interim meetings. And the goal is to kind of have them, between probably now and May of next year is kind of the target time frame for volunteers to have these meetings, either online, virtual meetings, or hopefully there won't be special sessions going on forever. That people will be able to have in-district meetings and again get to know and develop relationships with our legislators. So again, thank you for coming today. Spread the word, join the state action team, follow the forum, and engage with others, post questions. We'll kind of keep some things going. If you're from one of these other states in our region, start your own state action team, and we'll help you figure out, what would be appropriate or might work best for your teams. And then we do have a little bit of a social media thing that's kind of tagged on to our earlier economic environmental stewardship resolution. So you can follow those. And I think, Roger, can you put that other thing in the chat? Or I can do it, I think, if you. We'll put it in the chat here shortly. It's a PDF of the presentation. So if you want to download it and have the links available so you can click on some of these things. But again, the more we can get the word out and get more people engaged, the better we can do it. It takes a lot of volunteer time to get these meetings set up, but hopefully it'll help build some momentum as part of one of our key levers of political will for CCL. So I think that's it. Any other questions? So Roger, we might have
Larry,
time.
Larry, it's Joe. I have a question. I'm sorry if I interrupted anybody. So during the interim, this coming year is a non-session year, right? It's kind of in between.
Yes.
And do you have anything specific planned? Like there won't be a lobby day or anything like that, I'm assuming, but any other special kind of thing you're planning?
So what kind of the main thing we want, to try to do is get people to engage with their state representatives and their state senators, having those, intelligence gathering lobby meetings, that can happen kind of anytime, over the next 5-6 months. But there will also be some interim committee hearings that sometimes they start, sometimes they're in the springtime of the off year, and then they run through into the summer. So there may be some of those that we want to get, again, tap some of our volunteers in Austin to engage if they can. And also we'll be sending out action alerts potentially for people to provide comments in some of those interim committee meetings. And, they don't have to be super specific about a particular bill or whatever. They can be a little bit more general. What we did in the past was, hey, I'm so-and-so, my state representative is so-and-so, I'm a volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby. Climate's an important issue to me because of this. And then have a little paragraph on whatever, whether it's energy related or methane emissions or something, and put that in there and do it in, in a CCL polite, constructive way. And so we have a little bit more flexibility in some of these interim hearings than we do when they're talking about specific bills. So there'll be action alerts to follow, and these interim meetings, I think, will be key. So.
Yeah, and generally the House committees allow you to provide written testimony without being present. The Senate committees generally don't. So you don't necessarily have to come to Austin to participate.
Yes. Yeah.
And to keep track of what's going on, join the action team.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's we'll be trying to try to put some current activities on the main page, and then also put stuff in the forum that people can follow along, and again add ideas or comments or suggestions. That would be great. Bill,
one thing I learned, Larry, that I might just share: when you're testifying, you're not just testifying to the committee. It's online. It goes to the staffers. And I found that a lot of people recognize me, even if they didn't quite know where they had seen me before, during some meetings that I've been in recently. So I think there's a kind of a spillover effect. We may have a limited impact on the bills, but the staffers, Joshua Rhodes, the fellow who does such good research about the grid, I met him the other day, and he said, I've seen you before somewhere. And we figured out he hadn't seen me on the post office wall. It must have been testifying. So anyway, I just think that the effort that we make is measured in something greater than just the bills that we influence. I think that there could be a long-term impact by working with staffers, because they tend to be around longer than the reps and the senators do. It's kind of like your faculty in a university. The staffers move from place to place, and some of them that are really good, like Jeremy Mazur with Texas 2036, they get into prominent places doing policy. And I've learned to be cordial, factual, practical, and nonpartisan. So those are some words. And I'm also thinking that in this coming session, I put a couple of links up. One about insurance. Texas homeowners are paying more for insurance. I've been saying that every time I testify, but Texas Tribune wrote an article about it. And roads near Austin warped near Houston, warped because of the heat. So I think that the transportation infrastructure, as well as the insurance costs to our people, are very real issues, and can be new areas for us to address. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. Bill?
Yeah, a comment. I was going to suggest taking it off screen share, but thank you so much for your work, Larry, and sharing this, and to Ann and to Larry Lindenschmidt for all his testimony work in Texas. And I think around the country, CCL is doing more and more of this state outreach, and I think it's making a difference. But I think from what I've seen, Texas is further ahead than almost all other states.
Well, again, we learned a lot from Utah. New York has been doing stuff, California, all of them, but each one kind of has a little bit of a focus on what can impact what they're doing in their state, and it's different depending on the state. So, we learned a lot from some of the other states that have been doing things like, our first meeting guide actually came from a template that we got from one of the guys leading one of the New York State initiatives. So, I didn't mention that other than Utah, but, like you said, there's a lot of state level activity going on with different states. And so, we've got a state action team for Texas, but CCL's got a statewide action team to help connect other states as well. So that's a good place for people to connect and learn.
And I think some other states are looking at Texas too, and seeing what you all are doing here.
Well, I think we may have been one of the first ones to kind of do a lobby day, but I think and again, that was a lot of work for a lot of volunteers and outreach to, and we have people coming from a lot of, further distances and stuff. Sometimes that can be a challenge, but, our state, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma now is part of the region. These heavy energy states have got a lot of incumbency that makes it naturally hard for them to want to jump on this transition. And so things that we can do constructively to help them want to make that transition through our elected officials, always vote, but other things we can do as well. So.
And I'd like to reiterate something Bill had said, because when we had the conservative caucus up in Washington, D.C., it was simultaneous with what you guys did in Austin.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a mix up on our part.
Well, no, but the fact that we gave them real-time information and I think the biggest impact was when we said, the Energy and Climate Caucus actually had Republicans on it, right? And that got their attention. So anyway, that's a really good comment, Bill. I've forgotten about that, but yeah, that got their attention, and I think it really shows that was good for Texas and from a national level, because they take note of what's done on the state level. Anything else from anybody?
Matt has a question.
Oh, well, Matt's applauding. Matt, any questions?
No, I was just applauding and thank
Okay.
you for the content.
I think we all can give Larry a hand, because and all the Larrys that are involved, and particularly, what was it, 80 some odd people went to that lobby day. That's
Yes.
really impressive.
Yeah. We had a good turnout from Austin and also from other parts of the state. Susan Gillette came from Lubbock. I don't know, maybe they were the furthest away. We had people from Houston, all over Metroplex as well.
But it was
I was really happy. We brought a contingency of 6 people all the way from Lubbock, 3 older folks like me, and then 3 college students.
Wow,
Great.
that's great. Okay, well, I have a question for everybody. I mean, we were pretty much out of time, like I have a minute left, and we've had Dr. Barry Friedman doing deep research for a number of months on putting this New York Times questionnaire together, and it's he spent months on this. So anybody that wants to stick around, we could do it, but I'd like to have a quorum. I mean, if half the people leave, I think we could wait for the next time. But if you want to stick around for another, we can do it in about 10 minutes, I think. Show of hands, who would stick around for the quiz? Of course, I can't take it, but okay. All right, we'll do it. We'll allow Dr. Barry to narrate as we go through, but we'll shoot for getting it done in about 10 minutes. But before we do, just one thing I want to share for those that are going to be leaving. Let me share one slide here. Okay. Play from the current slide. Okay. Oh, shoot. I did the wrong thing. Okay, here we go. I'm going to just share my screen real quick. All right, closing. Oh, shoot. You weren't supposed to see that. Gosh darn it. Why did that happen? All right, ignore that slide and ignore the man behind the screen. Crap. All right, this is many thanks to Larry. Our next CNC, our speaker is Madeline Parra, by the way. She's going to talk about deep canvassing. And I didn't know what that was. So deep canvassing is talking with strangers in person or over the phone about hopes, fears, and aspirations. Actually, this is all tied to the next election cycle, okay? So that's what she's interested in. That's what she's working on. And I thank Susan for getting me in contact with her, but I think that's going to be really interesting. We're skipping December. It's going to be in January. So we'll go back, see if I can do this right this time. And anybody that wants to stick around, we're going to now do the Q&A, and Dr. Barry will then play from the current slide. There we go.
How about it?
Okay, Barry, will you take it away?
I'm ready. I'm ready. Yes.
Can I, next slide, please? I guess, can I do that? Okay. So this is from Roger. So in Italy, July 25th, 2023, there was extensive damage due to the following climate change event: locust, frogs, hail, cattle disease, or the river turned red.
Just for information, okay, the way the rules are, you keep track after you keep track of what your answer is. We're going to give you the right answer. And then you keep, it's going to be honor system. And then we're going to have a tiebreaker, which is now messed up, but we'll have another one.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question.
Second question. The end of November 2023, wind turbines are being prepared to be shipped by barge to the blank fork wind farm off the coast of Long Island. Fill in the blank. The East Fork, the North Fork, the South Fork, the Silver Fork, or the Golden Fork.
All right.
Question 3.
Go ahead, Mary.
How do I?
I'm sorry.
Maybe I can go. Okay. In the project mentioned in 2, the pace of work could be faster if not for a century-old law known as the Blank Act, which prevents the Dutch flagged ALIS from picking up parts from the pier itself in New London, Connecticut, and ferrying them to the site. Fill in the blank. Is it the Jones Act? Is it the Smith Act? Is it the Bray Act? Is it the no laughing? Is it the Hoover Act, or is it the Rockefeller Act?
If it's the Bray Act, it's going to have something to do with sailboats.
Well, it's it could, who knows? Next question. In 2023 August, 2 sites were selected by DOE to receive $1.2 billion to support direct air capture. One project is being developed by Battelle, nonprofit from Ohio. The other is being developed by A, ExxonMobil, B, Occidental, C, Shell, D, Total Energies, or E, ConocoPhillips.
Okay, keep track of your answers, please.
Question 5. Lithium prices as of November 30th, 2023 are down about blank percent from their November 2022 high, according to the Chinese benchmark price. Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 40%? Is it 60%? Or is it 80%?
It's a good question.
What company has plans to build a small modular nuclear reactor at Seadrift, Texas? Is it Tesla? Is it DuPont? Is it Dow? Is it Air Liquid? Is it Buc-ee's? Or is it Starbucks?
I think it must be Buc-ee's.
No hints. Larry, you're an expert, so please do not give hints.
It's where I'm doing my Christmas shopping, Buc-ee's.
Very good. Okay, question number 7. The Big Wires Act would establish requirements to make the electric grid more reliable and resilient. B in Big Wires Act is an abbreviation for what word? Biden, battery, ballistic, bulk, or building?
All right. So this question is defunct now, I think. You all saw the answer, right?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Shoot, that was really an interesting one too.
It was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The answer is 50, by the way, if you didn't see it. All right, are we ready to go through the answers, Dr. Barry?
Yes, ready to go through the
Okay. And this is the honor system now, okay?
honor system. Yes.
If we catch you cheating, we're going to tell Susan.
Yeah. Okay. The answer to number one is hail.
Okay.
The answer to number two is South Fork. The answer to number three is the famous Jones Act.
Okay.
It doesn't have to do with sailboats, but it does have to do with ships.
Yeah, that we had learned about that earlier from Bill Bray. So we figured it should be called the Bray Act, you know. But question 4, it is Occidental, right here in the Woodlands. Question 5, it's actually 80%.
That was I had no idea. That's great.
Yeah. It was in the paper a few days ago. Question 6, it is Dow. And question 7, building.
Okay. So who has, and the tiebreakers, okay. We're going to get out of this. We're going to go back. Stop share. So how